Hello there, this is Oliver Dillon-Stout. Right now we are looking at the C# review assignment for Programming 2 SGD 213, and it is dash N885. Okay, this is the third time I've recorded this because my windows do not want to work properly together. So, I will do my best. Let's go for it. Alright, create a new console application. Clearly we have a console application in front of us. You would say File, New, Project, and then choose the correct type. Alright, so since we've gotten past that, create three variables of different data types. Alright, we have integer, string, and bool. What is going on in these three lines? Integer, and then its name, which is potion, and then we assign it a value, which is 4. String, which then needs alphabetical information. We're going to name that Pokemon, and Pokemon will equal Squirtle. We're going to need those quotation marks around Squirtle since it's a string value. Alright. Bool is always true or false. Currently, bool alive equals true, which is going to relate to Squirtle is currently alive. Alright, so now we need to take these bits of information. We're going to work on integer and string only, and we're going to say that we want to change the number of potions and we want the Pokemon Squirtle to change. And how is that done in Pokemon? It's usually done through evolving, which is what's going to happen in this case. Alright. So we are going to display all of our information when the user begins the program. It's going to say your active monster is A, and then it'll state whatever we had in the string value, which is going to state Squirtle. So console write line, currently you have, and then it'll tell us the number of potions we have, potions in your bag. Console write line, alive, since alive is going to represent our bool, so we say true. Your Squirtle still has some health remaining. Okay, so console read line is going to make it so that it looks pretty and it pauses so that the user doesn't get overwhelmed with a bunch of information at once. Alright, so how do we change these values? Well, let's change potion to be potion equals potion minus 1, basically says 4 just turned into 3. And it's going to trigger at this point in our program. Why would that happen? Well, let's say we have a scenario where we need to. Why is this diagnostic tool? Can I close that? I don't. I don't know. All right. So we need a reason to have used the potion. So in this scenario, the opponent lands a critical hit and dodges your attack. You have low health. Use one potion. You only have plus potion plus health potions remaining. Okay, so we take this out of the quotations, and that's going to allow it to be understood by the program as being the int value and not just thinking that it's supposed to type it out back to the user. So the other thing about this is we will know that this has worked properly, the potion minus 1, if this does not display 4 but instead displays 3. So we will be checking that in one moment, but before I do that, we are also going to evolve. So console read line, make it look pretty. Console write line, your next attack lands on the Pidgeot. You gain enough experience to level, wait, what is happening, your, and once again, outside of the quotations, we say plus Pokemon plus, because we want it to display Squirtle at this time. Since we haven't evolved yet, we're still Squirtle. Now on the next line, you say Pokemon equals War Turtle. From there on, it should never say Squirtle unless we were to say Pokemon equals Squirtle further down in the paragraph of code. So at this point, whenever we say Pokemon again, it should say War Turtle instead. But instead of us typing War Turtle, this is the procedural way to actually get it to know without you having to tell it. Okay. And then we're going to display your Squirtle has evolved into a, and it better say War Turtle or else we've got some mistakes. Okay. So that is the first portion. This will be a test for me. Let's see if we can get this to work properly. Your active monster is a Squirtle, and by that I mean my windows keep having issues, this window and this window, and we just triggered it again by just trying to explain it to you. So now, uh, we will be working with less space. Come on, graphics card. Don't get too fancy. I don't need that. Your active monster is a Squirtle. Currently, you have 4 potions in your bag. True, your Squirtle still has some health remaining. Okay. The opponent lands a critical hit, dodges your attack. You have low health. Use 1 potion. You only have 3 health potions. Okay, so we know that the math is working because when I typed potion after saying potion -1, we automatically can do the math with the program, which gives us a 3. That's awesome. Success. Cool. Your next attack lands on the Pidgeot. Yada yada yada. Your Squirtle appears to be evolving. The only important portion of this is the Squirtle portion, where it is automatically. Okay, someone walked in my house. I had to go check who it was. Your next attack lands on the Pidgeot. Your Squirtle appears to be evolving. Okay, so wonderful. It displays Squirtle still, which is what we wanted. We haven't gotten to Pokemon equals War Turtle. Alright, so we're still there. We're gonna hit enter. Your Squirtle has evolved into War Turtle. Okay, so even though we only wrote Pokemon in the text, we are seeing a change in the value that is held within our string data type Pokemon. Alright, so that is successful. um, what's next? So we're going to skip the for loop until the end since that happens last in our program. For now, let's go back to talking about creating the class. Alright, so right click on the name over here in the Solution Explorer. You're going to say add class, class, name the class. We named it over here, messages. It's going to be Uh, internal class message. All right. And then our public function is going to be town. We initially had public static void town, but then you asked us to instantiate it. And from my research, this is what I was supposed to do instead. Um, I I understood it more when I had static in the front. I don't really know what we accomplished when you asked me to take the program CS file, create an instance of the class file, and utilize its public function. I know we're doing that, but I don't really know what I'm accomplishing by doing that, to be completely honest. Anyway, so public void town, we've got our public function. I'm used to saying methods, function is confusing to me. Alright, let's continue. So what's going on in this is you wanted me to print message to the console, and then we have the if else structure that responds to a question you ask the player, and then we have to make sure that the question and response is displayed to the console. Okay, so to do that, let's look at this. Console, right line, would you like to head back to town or continue exploring the woods? Enter woods or town. So we need to make sure that the user is most likely only going to think, oh, woods or town are the only 2 possible things I can type in. However, since that's not true, um, we have the else statement, which is going to basically loop the player back through the if statement if they do not provide a valid response. So that's awesome. It's a buffer to make sure nothing goes wrong. All right, next we need to say string option equals read line to lower. All right, let's break that down. The string option is going to be what represents which option the user chooses. And then we say console read line, and it's going to read whatever our user has put in at that point. So what is to lower? Well, what if somebody types in all capitals for woods? Well, we wouldn't be able to understand that, and by we I mean the console, unless it's typed in lowercase. So to force it to always be lowercase, you can type dot to lower like we did right there. Okay, so if the user types woods, console right line, you continue your adventure away from town. Else if console right line, you head back to town. and we need to uh, have the right lines displayed in our console, and we also need to display our user's input. All right, so let's check that that's working. Let me also see. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers the request for this. One issue that I will point out ahead of time is if we decide to stay in the woods, we have not created what happens to the user if they stay in the woods. So this program is still missing some elements. However, in relation to this assignment, it does fulfill all needs. So we're going to skip through this. Cool. We understand that. You consider to head back to town to visit the Poke Center Superstore where you can replenish your supplies. Would you like to head back to town or continue exploring in the woods? Okay, let me show you the different potentials here. So if I say enter, your response was not valid. Enter either woods or town. If I say capital woods, well, it's still going to understand that we said woods. The confusing thing for the user, like I just said, we don't have a route if somebody says woods. We have an if else statement that is functioning as needed though. So it takes us to the Poke Center regardless, even though that's not what the user said. So we're gonna show you what happens when we do things the right way, um, by following the prompt to go back to town, since it pretty much is suggesting that to the user. So if we say town, you head back to town. Perfect. So we have everything being displayed in the console at this time. That is requested by the prompt for this assignment. Alright, so we've made it finally to the Poke Center. I'm going to show you this now, and then I'll go through the code. What is your aisle number? This is odd way of phrasing it. That's like the Home Depot worker asking me what aisle I think an item is on instead of the reverse. However, point is this should work for what we have going on for the assignment once again. So what is the aisle number? We're going to put in a value of numerical information, 8, 7, and this will say which character. We'll do number 7. Okay, and we have 7 hallways and 8 aisles, just as we wanted. Alright, so we've created a shape, which is just a rectangle in this situation. That's being done right here in our program.cs at the bottom. So console right line. Welcome to the Poke Center. It appears you need to replace a few potions. So that's triggered from the beginning. Console right. What is your aisle number? Alright. And that is going to prompt the user to give us some information. Int aisle is saying data type integer named aisle equals convert to int32 console read line. Why do we have that there? Well, when you are we basically have to take in user input that is a string value and turn it back into an integer value. And so that is what the toInt32 function is doing, is converting for us. So we take int hallway, repeat the same information, and then we ask which character the user would like to have displayed. We then need to state the string variable character. Character is going to essentially be read by our program and then used as directed. So when we get into the nested for loop, we are going to have the outer for loop begin, then trigger the inner for loop, and until the inner for loop is complete, the outer one will not complete. And we have for integer I equals 0. 0 is our starting point. I must be less than aisle for it to continue to do the third part, which is I++, essentially saying do one more iteration until I is equal to aisle. And the same for the J, which is representing hallway. And console right character is going to be triggered by that middle line. Okay, so that's everything.